All right, so I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Luis Viquez, and he is going to be going over all of our IUCN protocols today. And yeah, without further ado, Luis, you have the floor.
Thank you. Uh, so the first thing that we want to say, and I'm gonna start speaking in the general we, is we in the IUCN Bat Specialist Group, we don't want to pick a fight with anybody. The guidelines for field hygiene are a list of recommendations that we think and are backed by research can help us do our work in a more safer and better way. Doesn't mean that there's a direct risk, but that doesn't mean that we cannot aim to do things in a better way, right? So this has been the work of many, many people. This is a document that has been in the making for about a couple of years now. And I'll go a little bit through the history. But first of all, if you have not seen the guidelines, if you scan this QR code now, and I'm gonna talk a little bit so you have time to pull your phone and scan this, it will take you directly to the IUCN website where the guidelines, the most up-to-date version of the guidelines is stored. So these are meant to be live documents that can be updated at some point. So those links will remain live so that if you go into the link, you'll always get the latest version of the document. And I think the first thing we need to start describing is what is field hygiene, right? And it is a term that has gotten some attention in maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, but it's not a new term by any way. So field hygiene are a compendium of practices and a compendium of actions that one can take while when one is doing field work that can ensure the safety of the researchers, of the students that are with you, of the local community, and of the animals you're working with. So it's a list of actions that, when implemented, are going to diminish the risk of any potential damage from or any potential pathogen transmission or pathogen pollution, as we will discuss later, between the researchers and the subjects that are there studying. Also, at the same time, protecting the community that is in these areas. So when we use, like if we go to a standard definition, and we have a great picture of Amanda Vicente, a researcher from Costa Rica now working in, I don't remember where Amanda is working, I think it's Ohio, using some of the PPE recommendations. Field hygiene is a set of practices using standard, simple measures to minimize the risk that research activities result in pathogen pollution, the human facilitated moving or transferring of pathogens between species and sites. And this is really important because it is not just that we are protecting ourselves, it's we are protecting the animals and the ecosystems, right? We all know about Wino syndrome, and we all know what devastating impact it had in the bat populations in North America. Well, Wino syndrome, one of the main theories is that it's pathogen pollution. It's a pathogen that came from another site and was basically seeded in North America, and it was devastating. So field hygiene, for example, when properly implemented, will minimize the risk of something like that happening, right? So when we talk about pathogen pollution, it is this fantastic concept of the introduction of a new or non-endemic pathogen to a specific place, ecosystem, species, or population. So pathogen pollution doesn't mean, oh, we're going to get infected with something. It's like, no, we're preventing the movement of any potential pathogens between ecosystems, between places, between species, between populations. And this is really important because whether we realize it or not, our research may have an impact on what happens to the animals, right? So we need to be conscious, and we need to implement the best practices possible so that we can minimize this impact and the damages that this might have, right? So, and one of the things that people don't realize is that we all do field hygiene already. Field hygiene embodies things as simple as separating your spaces, you are not you are not categorizing or bleeding the animals in the same sleeping tent that you're using during the night. You're washing your hands. You're trying to keep your equipment clean. You're wearing gloves to protect yourself, leather gloves when you're holding. These are already practices that go into field hygiene, right? So it is not something that we now have to start doing. It's something that we have already been doing. It's just that we are gonna expand a little bit. What are the protections that we should be using at this point, right? So how does this all start? So on April 20, 2020, Dr. Tighe Kinston sent this email to all members of the bat specialist group, where the bat specialist group, under the conditions that we didn't know what was going on with COVID and whether COVID could, or the not COVID, but the SARS-CoV-2 could potentially infect bats, right? The virus that was now circulating in humans could go to bats. The bat specialist group decided to send an announcement. We want everybody to stop doing field research. We are assembling a working group, and we're going to try to figure out what's going on. We're going to evaluate what is the actual risk of the SARS-CoV-2 being able to go into bats, and having, if it's going to infect the animals, it's going to have any effect. Is this going to create a new reservoir? These were all questions that at the moment did not have an answer. So the safest thing that, and the recommendation at that point is like, let's stop doing lab research right now. And if you were doing any bat work at that point, you remember this. You remember this moment where we were all in a limbo of, we don't know what's going on. We only know that we have been told to stop doing research right now. So one of the problems that we had at that point is that we didn't have a set of practices in place, right? So we had to stop completely because we didn't have different steps of biosecurity that we could go to, so that we could say to people, oh, let's raise the level of protection. Let's go to level 3 or whatever. We didn't have this. So after all the research was done, we realized, okay, we might need a set of practices that we can quickly reference in case we need to go into better precautions. We don't have to fully stop research, but there's going to be something that we can use and say, go to this level of protection. So for the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, what happened at that point is that the IUCN Bat Specialist Group released this recommendations that we name MAP, Minimize, Assess, and Protect. And the first version of this was on June 19 of 2020. And as you can see, this was co-authored by many authors in different parts of the world. And what we were doing is like, okay, how can we mitigate these circumstances? This is going on. Some type of research has to continue because it's impossible to stop it. But let's set up mitigation strategies. Let's minimize, let's assess, let's protect. This is what we call MAP. And this was actually extended in the second version, where we lower some of the precautions that we were recommending at that time. Once we had information, once there was research, and we were more certain that this SARS-CoV-2 was not able to easily infect animals or infect bats that were not from the specific areas of endemicity, then we lower some of the recommendations and we change it to AMP, which was assess, modify, and protect. And we created a specific set of guidelines for different activities that have different levels of contact with the animals. And this is where it becomes really important, because field hygiene is highly dependent of how much contact you have with the animals. It is not the same, and you don't have to wear the same level of protection if you're just watching animals leave a cave that is, I don't know, 25, 50 meters away, versus you being knee deep in guano inside a cave collecting samples, Those are two completely different levels of exposure, and the type of PPE that needs to be worn where in each of those situations is completely different. So this is contact dependent for sure, right? So after these recommendations were released for cavers, bat rehabilitators, and then researchers in general, these recommendations were weighted according to that specific exposure risk, right? So we see here researchers in Uganda, and we see also, again, Amanda in Latin America. And the level of PPE that is being worn has to do with where you are, which species you're working with, and in which conditions you are, right? So these are all things that have to inform the actions and the level of protection that you're going to be using. So once that, let's say, the emergency was over and we knew enough about SARS-CoV-2 that everybody was confident to go back into doing research and handling animals again, it's like, okay, we just went through this, and what happened? We need to be more ready. We need to have a set of rules and a set of recommendations. And this is where we decided to, with all these conversations that happened around what we were doing and how we were doing things, it's like we are at a crossways where we can actually change some of the ways that some of the behaviors we have and some of the protection measurements that we're using to improve our practices. We can always do better. Right, and that it is not a thing that we are we're telling people that there's something wrong with bats now. Is not that we're saying, neither we're judging people that were not using this 40, 50 years ago, but now we have way more information and there's more research, and we are in a crossway where we can improve the way we do things. And why wouldn't we want to improve, right? Why wouldn't we want to do things in a safer way, right? So this is where the initial work for the guidelines for the field hygiene begins, right? This idea of, okay, we just went to this, we need a set of rules, we need a set of recommendations that can help us later on, so we can tell people, go to this level or go to this other level, where we are basically covering all the bases. And at the same time, this is a moment where people are actually listening to this. Let's take advantage of this and let's try to improve the way we're doing the work. So why do we need to adopt field hygiene? So the first thing is we need to protect bats and protect people. And this protect bats is preventing this pathogen pollution that we're talking about before. And also, when we say people, we are not just meaning the researchers. We're meaning also the local communities, the people that are there helping us, right? The way we clear the table, the way we dispose of the trash once we're done. These are things that need to have some context so that we can protect the people that are around us as well. And one of the main criticisms that always comes up when you mention PPE or any level of protection is like, well, what will people think if they see me wearing this? They will think there's something wrong with the bats. It's like, first of all, that is something that is part of our job. We need to be able, and part of doing conservation is being able to have those tough conversations and being able to tell people why are we doing this? How are we doing it? And that we have more exposure to these animals than probably anybody else, right? How close we get, how often we are handling animals, and also that we are not just doing this to protect ourselves from the bats. We're doing this to protect the bats from anything that we might be carrying as well. And we're doing the equipment disinfection so that we are not moving pathogens between one side and the other. So that argument is something that we need to have. We need to take our time to explain that. And with everything with conservation, it is not an easy conversation. It's not a conversation that will happen in 5 minutes. And it's a conversation that we cannot give everybody a recipe of how to have, because it will be context dependent in each of the sites. But it's a conversation that we definitely need to have. This is part of our job. And it's also part of our job to protect the crews that are working with us, right? By implementing this, we are protecting the people that is working with us. For example, what how do you know if somebody in your team is immunocompromised? You don't know, right? And they shouldn't have to disclose this to you because it's private information. But then the measurements that we use to handle bats should be able to give a minimum level of protection to everybody, regardless of the how immunocompromised they are. Sorry, I was trying to find a word, but I couldn't find it. So, and I know that there's going to be more questions about this, and we will get back to them later on, but let me finish. So why do we need to adopt field hygiene? We need to protect the bats and protect the people that are working and are around the bats. So we want to, let's say the connections that we want to close are the ones from bats to people and from people to bats, but also between bats to bats, mediated by us, our gloves, our pesolas, our nets, or all the equipment we're using that we should be always disinfecting when we're moving between sites, okay? And there's another thing that is a political thing. There's a need to self-regulate. Why? Because politics in the US and everywhere else are special, will change depending on the government that you have. So there's no clear rules that will be maintained. So we thought, okay, as a body that works with the conservation of bats, we can provide these guidelines, and they can be like the self-regulation, or they can be like the aspirational that thing that we're going for. Okay, and also, as I said before, it is a chance to do things in a better way. And why wouldn't we want to improve the way we're doing things? So what is PPE? And there's a lot of things, because when people say PPE, immediately everybody talks of what they erroneously think that is a biohazard suit, the white Tyvek suit. That is not a biohazard suit. Biohazard suits are completely different. That is just a level, a protection, right? Painters wear those same type of suits, right? And what you want to establish is you want to establish barriers between your clothing, your skin, your mucous membranes, meaning your eyes, meaning your mouth, your nose, and the animals, right? Because that's where transmission can happen. And because even though they will look really cool, we cannot give the pets mini goggles and mini masks. Then it is on us to wear this to be able to protect the animals as well. So think of layers. That's what you want. So the minimum level that we are recommending people that we should use is like, you should have a dedicated field clothing. This is just the clothing you're using while you're handling animals, while you're capturing animals, while you're weighing them, taking blood samples, putting rings, putting GPS trackers. Any moment that you might be in contact with an animal because of the work you're doing, you should be wearing this dedicated clothing. The moment that you take a break, for example, you're working in teams and one of the teams is going to go for lunch, first thing you do is you change out of those clothes, right? So why do some people wear Tyvek? I wear Tyvek because for me, it's easier to take down that layer than to go change. It doesn't mean that it will be the solution for everybody. It also doesn't mean that it shouldn't be the requirement in some situations, depending where you're working. It is just one way of doing things, right? What you want is that those dedicated clothings are not mixed with your normal clothing, right? You shouldn't go to sleep on the same shirt that you were all day capturing bats with, right? That's what we're after. A face mask. We already know this is great. This is great also because it prevents you from touching your face a lot, right? Like you're touching the mask, right? And when we all start wearing masks, that's the first time you realize how many times you touch your face in a day, right? So if you are wearing gloves, but at the same time you're touching your face with your gloves all the time, it is not doing that much of a job, right? So a face mask, a surgical mask, a KN95 respirator mask, even one of the fabric ones that we were using at some point in the pandemic, that will do. But wear some type of face protection. Eye protection. This is something that is controversial for some people. It is on our recommendations because the membranes in the eyes is a perfect spot to be inoculated with anything. But yeah, if you're already wearing glasses, right? And I wear glasses when I'm mist netting, for example, and I have been taking out a bat, and then I have poop in my glass, right? So it's one of the things that is one more layer of protection. Then handling gloves. Please wear leather gloves to protect yourself from any type of bites. And what we do, because I do wear nitrile gloves, I wear my leather gloves and a nitrile glove on top of that. Why? Because the leather gloves will get super damp if you're handling animals all the time. If you have a nitrile glove on top of that, you can easily change that layer up and down, right? Even when I'm only wearing nitriles, most of the times if I'm working with animals, I will wear 2 layers. Not because I'm extra cautious. It's because by wearing 2 layers, removing the top one makes it easier. I don't know if you have ever tried to put a nitrile glove on your hand when your hand is all sweaty. It is quite hard. So if you're wearing 2 layers, it is actually easier to put another glove on. And finally, some type of special shoes, right? Rubber boots are absolutely fantastic. They're easy to disinfect. They can be put in chlorine. They're easy to wash. They protect you not just from stepping into something. They will protect you from snake bites if you work in the neotropics, where this is also a big concern. So this is the personal protective equipment that we will recommend people to wear, right? This is what PPE is like, right? But the process of field hygiene goes beyond that, right? So it is a process that involves things that you do before, during, and after field work. And this is how the guidelines, when you look at them, and I'll put the link up later again for people to get a view of that. This is a process that involves a step before, during, and after field work. So before, you want to make sure that you have all the permits and all the vaccinations that are needed in the area that you're going to be. You want to evaluate the risk depending on geographic condition, the bat species, and the research activities that you're conducting. It is not the same. It's like, for example, in my work, I'm working in Uganda and in areas where there's bats that have known activity or non-antibody as seropositivity against some type of filoviruses if I'm inside that cave, or if I'm in Panama or back in Costa Rica, just working with Thyroptera or Ectophila. Those conditions, those places, those species are completely different. So we do need to do some research, and we need to understand the risks depending the geographic region we're working, the bat species, and what activities we're conducting with them. Step 2, once you know where you're working with what species or what species you might capture in that area, what research activities are you doing? Are you just observing? Are you bleeding animals? Are you taking only fecal samples? Are you collecting whole specimens and doing dissections in the field? You need to select the appropriate level of PPE depending on those activities that you're going to take. And this is where the guidelines will take you through. And I'm on purposely not showing this right now because it is something that needs to be evaluated case by case of what is the appropriate level of PPE that I should be wearing. Then the step 3 is prepare that PPE, and field safety plan includes basic things like where is the closest hospital? What are the disinfectants we're using? Is somebody allergic to something like that? And step 4 is you train all your personnel in the PPE use and the field safety and hygiene plan, right? How are we going to dispose for things? Are we going to put things in red bags or in black bags? How are those bags need to be disposed of later on? If I'm working something that, for example, Tiga was commenting once we were discussing this, is like they were doing field work in a really, really remote place. So your field safety plan has to include some context of how are you gonna dispose of everything that is left after the PPE you use, right? Are you going to burn it? Are you going to bring it back? If you're going to bring it back, what is the risk for the person that is carrying that, right? So all those things need to be considered in the field plan. Now, once you get there, you have all your PPE, you have trained everybody, you want to do some basic things. Check on the team health and the readiness before each night. People should not handle animals if they're feeling sick. That is a general rule, and something that honestly I think we have been bad in general, because there's this idea of I have to be tough in the field. I have to be, I call it the Rambo complex, where you have to be extremely tough and you have to overcome everything. And yeah, like you can fight a crocodile while holding 3 bats, whatever. Check on the health of your team and check on the readiness. And if people are feeling sick, they shouldn't be handling animals that day. Why? Because the risks are higher, not just for the animals, but also for the person, right? If you're sick, your defenses might be lower, right? So it is a logical thing that we need to start doing. Establish separating working spaces for living and for working with bats. Do not eat on the same table where you're doing dissection. It sounds like something obvious, but it's something that has been done for a long time. And those are the conducts that we want to start changing, right? Like you don't want to be eating a sandwich while you're wearing the same nitrile gloves that you were using to capture animals. Prepare the processing station. And there's a beautiful diagram that Ken Rafael helped us make of how do you prepare this and how do you clean up after, right? Depending on the situation. And there's recommendations on disinfectants that can be found everywhere in the world, depending on the levels that you're using, to clean your equipment and what is the perfect way of cleaning equipment, right? Because there's an order to this of how you clean things, how long you need to let them sit with the disinfectant or with the ethanol. The practice of just spraying some 70 or what knows percentage ethanol on something and immediately wiping it, that doesn't do anything, right? So there's a lot of recommendations and a lot of guidelines of how you can do this in a better way. And these are all included in this document. Finally, how you're going to do your bat collection, how you're going to do your bat processing and your bat release. We're not telling you exactly how you're going to capture the animals. We're telling you the precautions you need to have around each of these steps. And the last step, which is probably the hardest because at the end of the night, everybody's extremely tired, is how do I clean the space down and how do I do the breakdown of the place that I was working, right? So this proper training and this idea of having a field safety plan that has clear rules for those moments that even though that we might be extremely tired, if we have a diagram of what we need to do when we're done processing animals, it will make it easier. And finally, after we're done capturing the animals, we're ready to go home. Before we put everything in our truck or we start hiking back with things, we need to disinfect the equipment and the clothes, washing the clothes with hot water and plenty of soap, disinfecting the equipment, what equipment I can submerge in soapy water, what equipment I cannot submerge in soapy water, what equipment I can put chlorine, or what other I cannot put any chlorine or bleach on it because it might damage it. These are all the recommendations and how to set up those solutions to be able to do that. And finally, how to properly dispose of those biohazard waste and the shards. And the last thing is stay in contact with the team. After you're done, everybody comes back, everybody goes home, shoot them a text, send them a WhatsApp, stay in contact with them and monitor the health of everybody once you're back. So we have created several different levels of PPE, and those I just want to show them really quickly because I'm almost done with this presentation, but I wanted to show you what are some of the difference. For example, if I'm doing capturing close proximity work, that means I'm taking bats out of nets, I'm measuring, I'm attaching, I'm putting pit tags on them, for example. This is close proximity work. We recommend people to wear gloves, mask, dedicated field cloth, dedicated footwear, and optional the eyewear if you're doing this. Like I wear them because I have seen poop fall on top of my glass. I work with really big bats. So for me, I know the value of it. I know some people see that this is, think that this might be too much. So we recognize that, and that is why in the PPE basic, we are putting this as an optional item. However, there's a higher level, which we call basic plus, which is activities for higher risk, which, for example, includes bleeding bats, right? Or doing dissections or stuff like that. This is where we want gloves, fitted mask, and respirators. Looks how it changed from just a mask to a fitted mask, N95, KN95, or even a PAPR, one of those respirators that has a HEPA filter, depending on the work you're doing. disposable or fully disinfectable clothes, things you can bleach fully. One thing that is really nice is this, I think in the US, I don't know how they're called here. I know in the UK they're called boiler suits, which is like this full piece. I don't know if somebody knows what's the name here. I think is it boiler suit as well? Dana, do you know?
I don't. I don't know. I've never heard
It's
of a
like a jumpsuit.
yeah, like coveralls, a jumpsuit.
Yes, like a coverall, a jumpsuit. First of all, they're really nice because if everybody in your team is wearing this, they all look damn cool, especially if you put some bats on them. But you want something that is either disposable or that you can fully disinfect after. Basically, submerge this in bleach or being able to wash this at a really high temperature without shrinking and becoming clothing for your dolls after that. You want to still be wearing rubber boots. This doesn't change. Rubber boots are magical, but we do want you to wear eyewear when you're doing this higher risk activities that might include taking blood samples from animals or doing dissections. And finally, there's some things that are nice to know is what's the order in which you put things and in which you remove the things, right? And which are the steps that you disinfect so that you're not throwing all your hard work out the window because you took things in the wrong order and then you remove your gloves the first thing and then you touch your face, right? And then it's like you wore the PPE and you throw everything out the window at the last second. So we have these nice diagrams that are meant to be printed and put somewhere so that people can see what is the order that you're supposed to put on this and some of the other equipment that we will ideally want you to have around. And I kept it short because I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So that's basically what I have for you today. This is a picture of me wearing somewhere between basic and basic plus. This was before we were releasing those guidelines. If I would change something here, I would probably use something over my hair because I was inside a flight cage and bats were flying over me. So that's something I would change about this. I'm wearing 2 layers of gloves. If you see here down below, you can see my protective gloves and the nitrous on top of that. And I will probably wear eyewear as well. So there's always room for improvement. And that's the thing, like it's just guidelines and we have a chance of making things better and doing things in a better way. So I don't know if anybody has any questions right now.
Yeah, I'd like to open up the floor, see if we have any questions for Luis. It was pretty thorough though, so thank you. And now I'm looking up because I'm gonna have to get coveralls for my upcoming field season, having moved somewhere new. So to reduce the risk of potentially transporting from one site to another, I'm getting new boots, new coveralls, new everything. And you can get it with really cute patterns.
Exactly. You get the chance to put also like really nice bat patches on them.
Yeah.
And then you look like the Ghostbusters showing up to a field site. I think that's cool. Jordi, you have a question?
Hi. Well, I kind of just want to say thank you to you and the rest of the team for putting this together, especially in the early times of COVID for putting that together, because at the same time here in Canada, we were trying to put something like that together and there wasn't really much guidance on that. And so to kind of have a global initiative that you're a part of, kind of write those guidance and publish those guidance that gave us a lot more confidence on it as well, and seeing that we were kind of in line with your guidance. And I'll also say that's kind of a little bit of a plug that here in Canada, we've also been writing a document on welfare considerations for bats when handling them for research, which has a section on the hygiene component as well. So that's submitted to the Journal of North American Bat Research. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, mainly just like thank you for the whole through the whole process. Every time we had to make some updates for our kind of like COVID handling guidelines as new information became available. Just having the information that you've presented today and that's been around in older versions has just been very, very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. No, we're happy, and like we were learning while we were doing this, and we were reading a lot of papers. And something I can promise you is that everything that is in here, it is not somebody's opinion. It has been severely vetted by long discussions. And one thing that I really like about the IUCN, that like this effort, is that it's a global effort. So
Mhm.
it is not just meant uh, for global north. It includes the perspective of the global south in what is available in terms of, for example, disinfectants. So we have basically recipes for disinfectants that you can find anywhere in the world. And this is part of the effort, because sometimes you start reading some of these guidelines and they're like, oh yeah, you need to buy this Tyvek suit. And it's like, I cannot get that. Like if I'm in India, or when I'm working in Uganda, we cannot get that. So it's like, how can I substitute this? So that's where we were getting creative with the boiler suits. And there's some discussion about rain ponchos, for example, right? And that's the thing. Like it's like, is the spirit behind it is create those layers to protect, not just being married to one specific disinfectant on one specific brand that needs to be used as a coverall. Yeah.
I did see another hand raised. I think it was Carlos. If you wanted to, did you still have a question or was it answered?
Yeah, yeah, a question for Luis. First of all, thank you, Luis, for your presentation. Then I wanted to ask you how about the cloth bags for storing the animals, what the recommendations are for managing those, what the numbers, how to
Mm.
disinfect,
So
yeah,
So that's a really good question. And this is something that, for example, where let's say when I grew up academically, we reuse the bags all the time, the same bag, like
yeah,
without
totally.
even without washing. And this is something that I have changed now, right? And we all have the chance to do things better. So depending of where you are, I recommend this ones. These are called cheese cloth bags. They're really cheap. They're meant to be disposable. Um, and we use them as disposal. However, this can be fully bleached
Mm-hmm.
and then can be disinfected. So it's, you don't want to use a bag with a new bag without having disinfected that bag before. That is the technique, right? You need to find you need to have enough so that you have one bag per animal per night, assuming that you can wash them before the next night, right? So that will be the recommendation, is like, just make a bunch, and I make them in different colors, for example. Or now, like when for Uganda, we buy these ones from Uline, and I also carry one of this in my bag. Well, not right now because now it's cold, but during summertime,
You
know
never
this,
know when
people.
you're gonna find a bat.
Exactly. So I have a
Yeah, right.
bag in my backpack, and within this bag I have one pair of nitrile gloves, one leather glove, and one mask. And this goes with me everywhere, right? So if I just have somebody calls me, I have a bat here, I can quickly put this on. I'm not gonna have special clothing, but I'm just taking a bat and probably remove it and taking it outside, right? But I have my protection. Especially because if it's a bat that is found during the day, you don't know, right? The weird behaviors sometimes can be signals of something else. But yeah, so um, going back to your question, have many bags and have a way of disinfecting them between washing with soap and then bleaching, or even boiling them with bleach with chlorine. That will be enough to disinfect them. However, if you do the chlorine or the bleach, you need to wash them in water, just water again, because otherwise they become irritant.
Okay, perfect.
I had a question.
Mhm.
So would it be considered good or bad practice? Let's say you're getting a bat out of net, you have your nitrile gloves on, and you have your individual bags, and you're trying to reduce waste in the field. Like I'm sure that we're all many of us have an ecology centric mind, and so we're thinking like, oh my God, all of the plastic waste. Uh,
Mhm.
that we produce as we are processing bats, especially with gloves. If you save the gloves that you are using for a bat, and you keep those gloves with that bag, with that bat, and then you put them on again, is that good or bad practice?
That's a really good question. I would say, like, for example, when I'm taking bats out of a net, I don't change my glove between bats. I change my gloves when I walk away from the net. If I go again to the net and I touch anything else, I change my gloves. But it is context dependent because this is my way of doing research in a place where there was no wide nose syndrome, right? So my practice was biased, or my way of doing that was biased. So if I'm here, I am supposed to change the gloves every time I touch a different bat. So what I would say is you might be able to do this, but I would definitely disinfect those gloves before removing them. So if you have, which is adding something else, right? You have like, it's not baby wipes, but the ones with Clorox, and you can wipe your gloves and then remove them. Because the problem is, like, every time you remove them, the easiest is to just throw them out, because that's how you are making sure that you're not touching the inside and you're not cross-contaminating your layer underneath. So I think it is possible. I would definitely do like pass a Clorox wipe before, and then take them off carefully and attach them to with a binder clip to that bat bag, so that you know those are the gloves for that bag. Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any other questions from anyone? Okay. Well, Luis, did you have anything else that you wanted to mention before we sign off today?
Just saying that there's not a perfect recipe. There's many things. It's just we want people to be thinking of this, right? And next time you're planning your field trip, plan ahead, right? Because many of these things can be solved by planning ahead and being sure that you have the supplies, or that you know what you're gonna do, right? It's like I do what I call, it's not like a unique concept, but a dry run, right? So I sit down and I go through, okay, from leaving the car to coming back to the car, what is all the steps that I'm going to take? And what are do I have all the materials that I need for any of those things? So doing that type of thing and having a field safety plan, which is something that, for example, I never used to do, and now we do, because it's just convenient to have this and know where the closest hospital is, how I'm going to dispose this. It's the SOPs, and then it's like, oh, what did we said we were going to do with this? It's like, just go to the document and you already had read it and somebody has vetted it. So that helps.
Yes, agree completely.
I just want to thank you, Luis, for doing this. I think it's great. And this video is going to be really helpful to forward to people who don't want to wade through the entire document necessarily, but want to learn the basics. So that's why I wanted to attend today. And I think it's awesome. So thank you so much. This is going to be so helpful.
I think it's great. And we have an opportunity to do better. Like, we all did things differently in the past, and we're not judging anybody because now we know differently, right? And it's just, things evolve. We used to put asbestos in ceilings 50 years ago, and we thought everybody thought this was fine. And then research show us that it was not fine, and we move away from that. And it's not like you're judging what happened at that point. It's like, we can do something differently and in a safer way.
Yep. And safer for both us and for the wildlife that we all care so much about.
Exactly.
So if it's not doing it for you, it's doing it for all of those little critters.
Yeah. So maybe your boilers should said, we do it for the bats on the back.
We do it for the bats.
Okay. Then if anybody has a question at any point, or I'm happy to, like, sending my email. I think if in the invitation there's my website or something like that, they can contact me. I'm easily Google. So
yes, and please, if this information is pertinent to what you are doing out in the field, we are going to be posting this talk on the YouTube channel. So refer back to it. And we will also be putting up a PDF version on the website as well. So these materials will be available. Luis put up the QR code right there at the start of the talk. So all of these references are available, and we will have the video up on the YouTube very soon.
Okay, perfect. Then
All right.
thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much,
much.
everyone. Have a
Bye
great
bye.
day.